Hello, Frank Shines and Umar Qureshi here again with Analytics AIML. Thanks for joining us. Recall during our last discussions, we talked about the overall scientific method to solving problems for a business or for an organization. That's known as DMAIC, Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, Control, and it's shown here on your screen. In our last session, we looked at the define phase and we talked about the project charter and how to write a project charter. In cases where you have a more complex type of project, you'll complete a complete or full project charter. In cases where you have what's known as a just do it improvement, for example, maybe you're just going to look at how do you improve the cleanliness and orderliness of your work area, called 5S. In that particular case, it's a just do it. You don't need a full project charter. One of the next steps that we then take as part of our define phase is we define the problem from the perspective of the process. The process is simply the physics of the business. It's the specific steps that we do to complete work. Anyone can explain the steps that they do to complete a piece of work. And so consequently, a process is a great way of helping the organization communicate. It provides a common language and everyone can understand how the different pieces fit together. Think of the old tale of the blind men and the elephant. So you have 4 or 5 blind men touching an elephant. One touches the tail and says, I have a rope. Another one touches the leg and says, I have a tree. Another one touches the side of the elephant and says, no, it's a wall. But only by putting all the pieces together will they understand it's an elephant. The same thing's true with a process map. So let's look at a process map. In this particular case, we'll use an example of making coffee. Since when we do a Google Trend search, we see that one of the highest searched items on Google is coffee. So most people kind of understand coffee. So let's use that as an example. This particular case, we're going to look at the process map for making a cup of coffee. And if I was to go to different people, or if I was to observe how people on average are brewing and making their coffee each morning, whether they're in their homes or perhaps a small cafe or restaurant, we might see these roughly half a dozen steps. Now, many processes in your organization could be 50, 60, 600, 6,000 steps. We're going to keep this simple and keep it to about a half a dozen. And in general, if you can keep a process map under probably 20 to 50 steps at a high level, the mid level, it's usually going to be adequate enough to get everyone to understand the overall approach to how the business is running the organization and bring everyone together so that they can solve the problem. Until you bring everyone together and map out the process, it is unlikely that you're going to be able to solve the problem, particularly with complex types of problems. Okay, so in the process map, the first thing happens is we use specific types of symbols to start or end a process or connect different parts of a process where you may have what's known as a process loop back. We would use a circle. So in this particular case, you can see the circle for the start of the process and a circle for the end of the process. So that shows the process boundaries. It's very clear. Where do we start? Where do we end? And when we've ended. So we'll go through, we'll get a group of people together and we'll ask them questions or we'll observe. And we find that one of the first things that happens is that we have someone that goes over, grabs a filter, and they places the filter in the brewer. And then the next step is they take water and they pour water into the brewer. And then they brew the coffee. So the expectation is that when they place that filter in the brewer with the coffee, you've got the coffee in the brewer, you pour the water into the brewer, and now you're brewing. You're waiting for the coffee to complete the brewing process. So you wait. Is it ready? Yes. If it's ready, then you go ahead and pour the coffee, and then you serve the coffee, and that ends the process. In cases where you look at the brewer and it's still percolating, it hasn't completed its steps, then you have to wait. So you're constantly going back and waiting to make sure that the coffee has completed the process. So those are the high-level steps in process mapping. In this particular case, making a cup of coffee. Now, what's going to be really important about this is After we map the process, we're going to go and observe exactly what people do. And here are some of the things that we're going to typically find. We'll talk about them in our next session called .wimpy. We're going to find what's known as waste. Waste are non-value added activities or steps that people take that increase the likelihood of mistakes or errors or long cycle times and adds costs and things like that to your process. It makes it inefficient, makes for unhappy customers, higher prices, not only to the customer, but to society. So in this particular case, one of the things I might observe is that certain people already have the coffee in the filter, and all they have to do is grab the filter, place it into the brewer with the water. In other cases, someone has a filter across the room. They have the coffee in a different location on a different shelf in a different cupboard or cabinet, and they have to reach up high to get the coffee, and then they have to grab the coffee, pour it into the filter before they put the filter into the brewer. That's excessive motion, excessive transportation, and all these types of things. So what we'll do next is we'll talk about how do we analyze those inefficient and ineffective steps that often become part of our process if we don't consistently go back and make improvements to our processes. Again, this has been the process mapping as one of the first phases of our DMAIC define methodology, where we map out the process step by step using specific symbols, circles, squares, and diamonds. The circles tell us the beginning and end of a process or any loopbacks. The squares or boxes show us the specific tasks or activities. And then anytime we make a decision, we use a diamond. This has been Frank Shines and Umar Qureshi with Analytics AIML. Thank you.